Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Easy Conversations, a podcast about having easy conversations. I'm your host, Furkan Dandia. In this week's episode, I sit down with Michael Chard, who's also the host of the podcast, The Theseus Project. In this episode, Michael and I talk about some of the tools we use from a mindfulness perspective. Michael shares his own story of experiencing his mother's suicide and how that impacted him throughout his life. And until he didn't forgive himself and his mother, he wasn't really able to move forward. I hope you can get a lot out of this episode. And if at the end you could leave a review, I would truly appreciate it.
All right, Michael, welcome to the podcast. Again, thank you for coming on. Super grateful for you taking the time and coming here and having this conversation with me.
Thank you for having me. Really, thank you very much, and you honor me by reaching out to have this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And I think, as we've discussed, we both have a very similar message we're trying to share. We're kind of doing the same type of work. You've got your podcast as well. So, I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, maybe touch on your podcast, and we can go from there.
Sure. Like I said, thanks for having me. My name's Michael Chard. I recently launched a podcast called the Theseus Project, and what I wanted to try and do was to break down the stigma and the negativity around men and men's mental health and the discussion around men's mental health. Not just the discussion, but I suppose the perception of it is seen as talking about it was always seen as something of a weakness, especially in UK culture with our football culture that we currently have and manning up and keep calm, carry on, and all the rest of it. So I really wanted to do something to try and address that. So I launched the Theseus Project, I think, sometime in early January. And with that project, I based it. The name actually comes from Theseus from Greek mythology, and the symbol that I put in for, which is a very basic symbol, just shows the labors of Theseus,
Hmm.
of where he started as a young man, where he started as a boy, and all the things that he fought against on his way in order to becoming a man and eventually a leader of Greece. Um, and I think it was the trials of Theseus. I think there's 6, I believe. I hope so, because that's what I've done in the logo anyway. Um, and each of these trials shows a development, something that he had to overcome in order to become a better person. And I think that's, as men, we're kind of pushed out the door and, well done, you're a man, congratulations, thank you very much, out the door, you're on your own, you do your own thing.
Hmm.
And then what we found, or what I found anyway, is that there is literally no instruction manual to handling your feelings, and you're always led down this path of keep a stiff upper lip, broad shoulders, sit back, shoulders straight. It's wrong to be weak. It's wrong to cry. Stop crying. What are you crying for?
Hmm.
Man up is another one, which I absolutely detest.
Hmm.
So over the years, my own mental health suffered quite dramatically, what with abuse at home, being bullied. You wouldn't believe it to look at me. I'm 6'7" and a black belt in jiu-jitsu now, but it's you know uh, these types of things in our past lay the groundwork for the struggles and issues that we get later on in life. So
Hmm.
it's like I said, I'm growing up, emotional issues, emotional trauma. My mother passed away by committing suicide, and being exposed to the body and the constant mental and emotional torture up until the point where she passed, where she took her own life. And then having those issues from an early period in my life up until the 20s and 30s, when I suppose those issues laid the groundwork for quite a fragile um, adulthood. I think there's a description out there called an adult child, which when you're an adult and you're not being raised in any particular decent fashion, you kind of don't grow enough as a person, and you kind of languish within this adult child framework. And it's something which I think definitely applies to me. But on another note, I'll probably send you the link for that later on,
Mm.
so you can get an idea of what it is
Yeah,
I'm actually talking about. But
yeah,
yeah, that kind of gives you an overview of where I've started from, why I launched it, the theming of the podcast, and some background really on myself. So
yeah.
what about
No,
you? I would love to hear about you. I know this is your podcast, and I'm kind of taking over the microphone at this point, but what some of the content you put out there is seriously impressive, and I really enjoy listening to it. You get some really good value from the stuff you put out, and
yeah,
I would love to hear a bit more of the background of you.
yeah. No. Again, thank you for sharing your story. Again, I appreciate you being vulnerable, and I think one of the things you touched on, whether it's your height or if you've got a black belt in jujitsu, I think we all kind of experience bullying in different forms, right? And it
Yeah,
does impact us. And I mean, for me, yeah, kind of the same things in terms of having those challenges, my inability to express myself emotionally as an adult, um, and then tracing it back to childhood. I was also bullied, but I was also raised in an environment culturally where in the South Asian culture,
yeah,
my parents had immigrated from Pakistan to Canada, but they maintained their cultural values. And in our culture, men just kind of keep it together, and there's no one really expresses their emotional needs or feelings.
yeah,
I was never encouraged. In fact, when things would bother me based on something my parents did, I was just it was the expectation was you just suck it up and accept it, and that over time, I guess for me, who's someone, I mean, I do feel feelings. I'm very emotional.
yeah.
Um, it did create a lot of challenges growing up, especially as I started getting into relationships in my
Hmm.
adult life. I struggled because I had this. I would consistently get flooded.
Yeah,
Anything would happen, I would just get flooded because I didn't know how to express myself. I knew something was wrong, and I
yeah,
knew I needed something, but I just didn't know how to express it to the people I was in relationships with. And I was consistently flooded. And then, kind of went through the motions, never really had courage to speak up for myself, and got married eventually, and
yeah.
that didn't work out. And yeah,
So
that
that inability to address, that feeling of being overwhelmed or flooded with emotion, is that something you think that comes from a cultural background, or do you think is something intrinsic to men as general?
to be honest, I'm not sure. I think for me, the way I look at it is uh, part of it is again being an emotional person,
Yeah.
and being sensitive. I experience emotions easily.
So you say
Uh,
you're a bit more empathic then in
yes,
nature.
yes, but then not being given that space or freedom as a child to harness that.
Sure.
I think it was very conflicting. Like, so I look at my son now, and he's very similar. He's emotional, he's sensitive, and I give him the space to express himself. Now, if it was the same, if I just shut him down, it needs to come out somehow, right? And unfortunately, if you're not, and it's like anything we do as adults too, right? If we're not expressing ourselves, or we're not dealing with issues in a healthy way, they're going to come out in unhealthy ways, right? And you can
Yeah.
try to numb
That's
the
a good
pain
point.
through alcohol, drugs, all kinds of stuff, but unfortunately, you're just delaying the process.
Yeah, and if anything, that dependency on some of either drugs or substance or
Hmm.
even a dopamine hit,
Yes.
doing things in order to get some sort of emotional or chemical response from your brain, none of it's going to last forever, and that will then precipitate, like you said, more damage later on down the
Hmm.
line, or a dependency on having to do a certain activity in order to try and alleviate some of those tensions.
For
I
sure.
think like you made a really good point there about doing some, a dependency on finding something in order to release a particular tension. And I think there was one that I was close to doing. And I don't know if you feel the same, but things like self-harming
Hmm.
was one of them. I hear about that a lot with women, but not so much as men. I don't know if that's because men just don't talk about it.
Hmm.
I mean, is it something that you've come across at all?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, self-harming is obviously subjective too, but I think there's different forms of it. It doesn't always have to be physical. I
Yeah.
think you can mentally and emotionally self-harm yourself too. In my experience, it's, I won't sleep, I won't eat properly. You know, it's like unhealthy habits like smoking cigarettes and stuff like that. All of those things are self-harm. I am
Yeah.
harming my body by not sleeping, by smoking, by not eating properly. So yeah, I definitely agree. There is a component of that because again, you're just trying to numb the pain or you're just trying to avoid it. And
Yeah.
and in my case, and that struggle still exists. I think being aware of it is definitely uh, the biggest step you can take, becoming aware of it and working
Yeah.
through it. And that's what I'm doing. But yeah, I think after going through a separation and finally coming to the realization that, I think at that point I was 34, 35, and
Yeah.
uh, an adult man.
Yeah.
And I came to the realization that, I spent a lot of time looking inward and reading and understanding myself. And now I'm studying psychology, but all of that brought me to the conclusion that, regardless of what happened to me as a childhood, or
Mhm.
as a child in my childhood, or what happened to me in my marriage, ultimately, how I come out of this and how I choose to live the next 50, 60 years of my life are
Mm.
my responsibility. It's my choice.
Yeah.
And it, essentially, I was inspired on my own to really continue to work on myself and continue to dig deeper, go for therapy, find answers, and continue to do that work.
Mm.
But at the same time, I came to a point where I'm like, okay, I'm not alone in this. Um, I'm definitely not the only person going through this. And,
Yeah.
when I was going through it, and I've mentioned this a few times, I didn't feel like there was a resource or a person I could turn to and talk to. And maybe that was my own problem because I didn't feel vulnerable enough to do it or ask for help. And as a man, I felt like I needed to keep it inside or keep it
Was that
together.
was that a case of maybe you didn't feel close enough to those around you to actually have that conversation, or was it perhaps something like where you just didn't feel you had the support network? So you probably thought that you were going to get judged unfairly, so you didn't want to expose yourself in a particular way.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of both where I didn't um, necessarily trust the people around me with that kind of information.
Yeah.
Uh, and 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 then on the other side, I think part of it was also the fear of being judged or being shamed, which prevented me from doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, coming to the point where I am now, I think going through that experience and recognizing that, at times I did feel really alone and isolated. I want to be able to help others and share the message, and that's why I'm having conversations like this where I'm trying to normalize these issues and make sure men understand that we're all kind of dealing with something. I mean, it may be different, but it's essentially, at the end of the day, it's the same. We're all struggling in different ways, and we just need to support each other and be a
Yeah,
voice for each other. So
100%, absolutely, 100%.
yeah.
The topics for podcasts I've been experimenting with to try and get an understanding of what the audience actually wants to listen to. And I think I'm 6 episodes in. I'm about to do the 7th
Hmm.
today, and that support network. I think that's crucial. I think is trying to explain to people that that support network probably exists, even when people don't think it really does. But it is there for a large majority of, I think, of people. They just don't see it. It's almost as if they don't see the wood for the trees. And everyone, like you said, everyone's going through something. Everyone's going through. Everyone has some sort of support or an issue where they need some sort of backup.
Hmm.
So getting back to the topics, what I've done is I've tried to structure it in a way that I can explain what I'm feeling and how I've dealt with it and what I've come across out in the big wide world, either on my own or through a support network,
Hmm.
and explain to people in quite layman's terms. I mean, let's be honest, I'm not massively smart, but I can turn around and tell people exactly how I dealt with something. And if they get value from that, then that's brilliant. That's worth even just one person doing it.
Hmm.
One person getting value from the podcast is made it all worthwhile.
Hmm.
The one of the podcast episodes I've done, forgiveness, was probably my most visceral, my most raw, where I've talked about where I was consistently bullied, which is something I'm going to address in another podcast later on. But I wanted to specifically talk about how I was bullied, not just in school, but by my mother. Um, and then the act of forgiveness in trying to come about facing that, and how forgiveness is not just used as a way of absolving guilt, but you're also using it as a crutch to try and end a situation, end a confrontation, just because you don't want to deal with it anymore, because you're not strong enough to deal with it anymore, or
Hmm.
you think you're not strong enough to deal with it anymore.
Hmm.
And by exposing my own weakness, by talking about that, I've probably had the most interaction on Instagram with messages and feedback through DMs and emails from that one post. So I think interpreting how we've come up against problems with our own mental health and what we've done as men to try and find a solution or a resolution, or a way out to try and get our to move our lives forward in a constructive way. I think that holds a lot of value for a lot of people out there.
Hmm.
And I've learned a lot from doing these episodes, and I think that if we could, as men, come together to try and better explain what each of these facets are that we're coming up against, and our own viewpoints on how to interpret these things and how better to get that message out, a database, if you will, I don't know,
Yeah.
some way of, oh, look, that person did it this way, try this, or that person did that, try that. It seems to be something which I think will have a lot of weight going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think, you kind of touched on it. Even if it's one person that we can impact, that's a success.
Absolutely.
And like you said, like not everyone's approach to it is different, and some things may work for some people, and others like may deal with it differently. And that's the goal of trying to cover various topics. And I think the forgiveness one is really important. It's crucial because without forgiveness you can't really move on, and you're basically a prisoner in your own suffering. And I think the other topic you had also covered was journaling. And I think that most of the people I've had on my podcast as guests, they've quite frequently touched on how journaling has helped them
Yeah.
deal with it. And again, journaling can take place in different forms, but just the act of writing things down does make a huge difference, and a lot of people have talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big list guy, and you can probably see over my shoulder, that shoulder there, I've got lists on the wall of things I want to get done in 2021, and I have A4 books of stuff that I've written down of things that I need to achieve and things that I need to do, and just to-do lists, forever to-do lists, post-it notes. I love post-it notes, and this is something which I think is journaling is a very powerful, and I think often underrated tool. I think it's only the people that do it are the ones that sing its virtues, and the ones that people that don't do it can't see the value.
Hmm.
And I think for every 1,000 people that scream about journaling and how good it is, there are several million out there that just don't see the point.
Hmm.
But with today's digital culture, with everything being online and everyone living out of a mobile phone, it's quite easy just to jot some notes down on your phone. But there's nothing as therapeutic as actually getting out a pad and a pen and sketching it down.
Hmm.
That connection between actually writing something out that for some reason is so much more therapeutic, shall we say? There is another word more powerful, but I can't think of it. Um, so it's therapeutic about writing it down and recording it in reality rather than it being digital and something which could just be filed somewhere and forgotten about. You have a book, something that you tangibly hold and smell and feel the pages and smell the ink with a pencil lead, and you can actually write it down, and your mind can just wander with it. The power of journaling is I could be talking about this for ages, so I'm going to shut up. The
No,
power
no.
the power of journaling is I am a convert. I am a convert. um I was always a list guy when I was at work writing to-do lists, and I was always something which, because a project manager by trade, and a scheduler by trade now, so data and lists are easy for me,
Hmm.
and it's something which I do professionally. But I think when I first got exposed to journaling, and I think I used a description in my Instagram of mindjournal.com. I found it by accident, and it was guys like ourselves and who were processing grief, and they launched a business off the back of it. And I just took a punt. Well, yeah, it's 20 pounds, 20 quid, something like that. Yeah, it's fine. I can easily just dump some money into it, have it delivered, and here we go. And it turned up, and it had instructions on how to fill it out. It was structured in such a way that made it easy just to get the thoughts out of your brain into paper. And next thing you know, I'm doing it verbatim, and it's every single day, every day, and it helps
Yeah.
so much. Oh, I
Yeah.
wish I could give that feeling of relief. I want to be able to get that across to you somehow.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think one of the things with journaling is when you start writing your thoughts down, you start seeing, at least for me, you start seeing the assumptions you've made. And
Yeah.
part of the problem is when you sit with your thoughts in your head, you're just going to ruminate and fall into your normal cycle or loop, as I call it. And then you're only feeding the information you want to tell yourself, the negative self-talk, right? And with journaling, I think there's that component when you start putting your thoughts down on paper, you actually see everything, excuse me, everything else that's going on, and you're able to process it differently.
Mm. It has some benefit into cognitive behavioral therapy cycles as well,
Hmm.
where you actually plot it out on a 4-point diagram, cause, impact, physical, and so on and so forth, and you can keep going round and round and round and round. And that was one of the pages was CBT um, outputs and things like that, which I thought was really good.
Hmm.
And I've just bought myself a book on CBT, so I'm going to try and study a bit more of that and expect some content about CBT soon. There's probably loads out there already, but
Yeah.
my interpretation, not a West Country bumpkin interpretation of it, not from me, not yet
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Um, and I just want to go back on the whole topic of forgiveness. And I mean, I know you've already done an episode on it, but what, like, I think part of the problem, and I struggle with it too, is again, being very sensitive. I tend to take things very personally, and forgiveness is something that I struggle with. But in your case, like, what were some of the things you did, and what kind of feeling did you experience once you were able to like forgive?
Well, it's really nice to meet somebody who's empathic as myself, who's quite an emotional being and in touch with themselves and their own emotions. I think for me, for forgiveness, um, trying to think about what I did, how I approached it. I think in the podcast, I shown that I wasn't very good at forgiveness to start with. I bore a grudge more often than not, and it was
Mm-hmm.
toxic.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't remember which quote or where I've heard it from. I think it's Sun Tzu, maybe not, but it was something about holding a grudge or something, or expecting to see your enemy, stand there long enough, you see your enemy float past in the river behind you, that type of thing. There was something really profound I was getting at there, but I think I completely fluffed it up. But yeah, I bore a grudge, and I've struggled very much with forgiveness, and anybody that slighted me in any even small and insignificant way caused me to kind of flip out. Uh, I was I'm finding it difficult to talk about it now, but it was very much a case of I wanted to try and do as much damage as possible to the person that
Mm-hmm.
affected me. And it didn't matter. That person could have stolen my parking space, or cut me up on the road. And wow, I had a real big problem with anger, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd be thinking about that person probably didn't even see me or didn't even check their mirror, for example. And I
Mm-hmm.
just pull over, mind their own business, and I'm thinking about that one dude the entire day,
Mm-hmm.
for example. And then if someone slighted me, if we went to a pub or if we went to a bar, or if we went, someone pushed past me or something, or made a comment about my size, I would obsess about it. I
Mm-hmm.
really would. And I've had arguments with friends. I had one friend who I don't speak to anymore, who used to really have anger issues, and we just vibe off each other. He'd had anger issues, I'd had anger issues. We loved each other to bits at the time. We don't,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, stay in contact anymore for other reasons, but um, we used to love each other's company, and we grew up together for years. But I mean, we could fall out over an episode of Friends. It was just that fire, that
Mm-hmm.
brimstone used to come out, and we wouldn't talk to each other for a week. Oh, you're going to go for it? No, you wouldn't. And now in my 40s, forgiveness is what are we doing? This is
Mm-hmm.
stupid. And that hindsight only comes from growth.
Mm-hmm.
That feeling of being able just to go, no, actually, I'm sorry. We need to have a conversation about this. Let's address it, and
Mm-hmm.
let's talk openly and honestly, and put these things to bed. And move on.
Mm-hmm.
But in the context of the podcast for forgiveness, I I spoke a lot about how do I or should I even forgive my own mother for
Mm-hmm.
not only the way that she treated me before she died,
Mm-hmm.
but the viewpoint of how I mean I don't subscribe to this, but the common societal beliefs is that suicide is a selfish act,
Mm-hmm.
when in reality is the ultimate cry for help.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and do I forgive her for putting me in that situation or that position? Should I forgive her? And ultimately, yes, is something that I need to say. I mean, I didn't for years,
Mm-hmm.
and I bore that grudge for years. It was like toxic for my soul, really powerful. That um, we try and move on from these experiences that are so powerful like that and toxic for trying to hold you back and not allowing you to try and move forward and understand what it is you need to do and grow as a human being, even if you did go through something as serious as bereavement.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I can relate to a lot of the stuff you said about grudges and holding on to things, because I'm very similar, or kind of like you, was similar earlier in my life, and now being at a point where, I'm a father and going through this growth, I don't see any value in holding on to things. And the way I look at it is like, if say I got into an argument with a friend, or if I'm apologizing, that's it. I'm doing my part, and there should be no expectation for an apology from them. Or if they don't want to let it go, that's their choice. But at least I'm doing my part, and that's how I look at it. I guess in the experience of kind of what you touched on, the whole forgiveness around the with your mother, when you finally did forgive her, like, what was that feeling of liberation? Like, how did you feel? Like, because again, it's like this weight you carry on your shoulders,
Mm.
because you're
Well,
holding. Yeah.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, being honest, and it sounds really odd to say this to someone I've kind of more or less just met, but the feeling of when my mother passed, considering what I went through, I was almost relieved back then that she'd gone.
Hmm.
And years after that, that compounded into I felt bad about feeling so good that she was gone.
Hmm.
That forgiveness not only was needed for what the act that she did, but also I needed to forgive myself for feeling that way.
Hmm.
So it was two tone really. It was a two pronged attack. I eventually forgave her for what she did and the position she put me in, and that felt amazing.
Hmm.
It took a lot. It took a lot for me to do it,
Hmm.
and I struggled with a lot of it
Hmm.
to the point where if I got drunk, um, if I was out with friends and I'd had a few beers, all of a sudden I'd turn into this emotional. I wanted to have attention and things, and all of a sudden I had too much to drink and I'd start blubbering. As all Mike's crying again,
Hmm.
and I don't feel like that anymore. And that's just only recent, and that's mainly because of lockdown. That I've been cooped up in my house thanks to the dreaded COVID.
Hmm.
Um, that I've had time to self-reflect on my own forgiveness for feeling so good, about God, I ain't got to worry, I ain't got to deal with that anymore. And that feeling of you shouldn't feel like this, Mike. That's your own mother.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that feeling of forgiveness, of feeling that relief, I forgave myself for that,
Hmm.
and I think that carried just as much weight because that was like having that had physical ramifications
Hmm. Hmm.
that manifested itself as high blood pressure and tension, super hypertension, always through my neck and my chest. Um, and as soon as I let that go, yeah, world of a difference.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I mean, people talk about it, and I don't know how accurate it is, but unfortunately, like, a lot of the diseases we experience in life, whether it's cancer or heart problems or whatever, I think part of it is us just keeping that tension, or that stress in our bodies, right? And it shows up in different ways. So it is important to
Yeah,
release it and forgive. And again, on somewhat of a different note, I think being emphatic means like, personally, I feel like when someone does something to me or hurts me, I almost blame myself. And I feel like, the story I tell myself is, well, I let them do that to me. And then
Yeah.
I blame myself. And I think part of the forgiveness, like you said, um, we need to be able to forgive ourselves too, because if someone does something to us, it's not a reflection on us. It's not because we're less than or we're not good enough that people do these things to us. It's their own challenges and struggles. And I think part of that forgiveness needs to come for us as well.
Yeah. 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 I think you're absolutely right that forgiving ourselves is as difficult as forgiving other people. I think in some cases it could be even more so
Mm-hmm.
because you're your own worst critic. And coming out and saying I acted in a particular way against my, I put myself in that situation. Why did you let yourself do that? Well, you
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you go there? You knew that was going to happen. You shouldn't have gone to that bar. You knew these people were going to be there. You
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't have drove down that street. That type of thing. And that comes into a little bit of overthinking as well,
Mm-hmm.
which is another episode that I did. I think that was my first episode where you kind of you start pulling a thread of a thought pattern, and forgiveness is perfect example for it. And why shouldn't I give that person forgiveness? And then before you know it, you've got 101 reasons why that person shouldn't. Why you shouldn't forgive that person. You've only got one reason why you
Mm-hmm.
should, and that one reason why you should forgive them is usually for your own benefit,
Mm-hmm.
which is I'm fine with it. And I think that benefit, I've only realized that when I got older.
Mm-hmm.
And to quote what Keanu Reeves said, which I thought was really, really poignant, he's got to that point in life where he said, if people come to me and say 5 plus 5 is 15, yeah, they're right. Yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. Yeah, it's fine. You
Yeah.
believe that as well.
Yeah.
And that methodology, I think, is quite powerful.
Mm-hmm.
In just that you don't have to be right with everything. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to be everywhere. So you don't have to be all things to all people, and that's perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And you can forgive yourself just to go, yeah, well, move on.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I feel anyway.
Yeah. No, it's probably because he was in the Matrix. He's got all this wisdom now.
Yes, the one.
Exactly. No, I agree with you, and I think you touched on it. It was probably in one of the quotes. I think what part of it is, like you said, like the people that we're angry with or we're holding a grudge against, they probably don't even think about it. They
Yeah,
could care less.
yeah,
And it's we're the ones who are choosing that suffering for us because of something someone did, but they're not even aware of it. So
yeah,
what's the
yeah,
point? And
yeah,
I mean, again, it's easier said than done because obviously we have both struggled with it. I mean, it's something that from time to time, it's still. I mean, I've definitely gotten a lot better because I don't see any point in hanging on to things anymore. But it is still something I go back to from time to time because, again, for me, I do take things personally. So it's working through it, and I don't apologize for being sensitive because I think there's so many positive qualities that come out of it, but I also need to be mindful of the things that impact me negatively and work through those.
What would you say? Question for you. What would you say is probably one of the bugbears that you're struggling with at the moment in this day and age? As of this morning, you've got up, you've got yourself a cup of coffee, you made yourself look fantastic at that lovely top you got on, and you think, okay, now I'm ready to face the day. What's next? But you've got that gnawing feeling in the back of your mind. You got a particular issue that you think, yeah, I'm still struggling with a little bit of this today. What would
I
that
s-
be?
I think for me it's consistency.
Okay.
So So, I can build on that a little bit, but I talk about all the work I'm doing and all the things I'm aware of, and I could talk through about them for days,
Mm.
but it's the practice and the commitment, which I am doing, but it's the consistency I struggle with. Doing it
Right.
consistently and being aware of it and being mindful, and when I'm angry or when I'm hurt, being able to consistently work through it is the thing you know probably the thing that keeps me awake at night, is being able to practice it day in, day out. And I think part of that, if I were to come full circle, is having that grace and forgiveness for myself, that I am human and I am doing my best, but holding myself accountable as well to consistently practice those things.
Yeah.
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 How about yourself?
For me, I don't know, this is probably a little something to do with COVID, really, and the lockdown that we're going through. Um, for me, is focus. I have lost, especially since the beginning of 2021, which is odd considering I've just launched a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm struggling with focus. Things which I thought I would normally blaze through, I'm particularly struggling with. So that eat, sleep, work, repeat, or that type of thing, that cycle, that daily grind. That I'm trying to, I've lost the ability to break that cycle. So, for example, I haven't worked out as much. Yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
cold outside. Nowhere near as cold as where you are, but
No.
it certainly is cold here. But wow, it's not as cold where you are. But it's cold outside, and I can come up with loads of reasons why I don't want to do it. And another day's gone, and another day's gone. And oh, look, we're 14 days way through February. We're almost a third of the way through 2021, and
Mm-hmm.
we're just getting warmed up. And it's just, time is getting so fast and
Mm-hmm.
speeding along. I just do not have that focus.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to get that focus back. I need to push myself to work to achieve that, recapture that focus. But I haven't got to kill myself to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, no,
And
I agree. Like, the start of 2021's definitely been challenging, and yeah, I mean, it's been hard. I find, again, with productivity, I see some days where I'm productive, and other days it's basically the day just goes by and you're like, wow, what did I accomplish today? So yeah, it comes back to that consistency for me, being able to consistently be productive. But yeah, um, it's definitely been a challenge.
yeah, and I want that energy back that I had when I was in my 20s and 30s. I really want that back. That's something which I'm desperate to get it back. That jump out of bed, right? Let's go do something. Woof, I'm gone. Now it's, oh god, I just got to get dressed. Hang on a minute. Oh, got to go feed the cat. Oh, it's cold outside. And no, 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 no. I don't like the way
Yeah,
this feels.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. And again, it's been such a challenging year, because we're almost at a year now, with this whole COVID lockdown and stuff. And yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, when lockdown first started, for us, I think it was early March
mhm,
last year for the UK. We were one of the last countries in Europe to do it, which was just bonkers. But
yeah,
I'm not going to make this a political podcast. But the we're getting on for almost a year now, and for the first 6 to 8 months on the way up to Christmas, I was running, I was exercising, I was reading, I was um, uh, performing, I was being productive, I was doing the
mhm,
best I can for my job, I was thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead for my career. And now I don't know if it's just where I haven't grown complacent, far from it, but
mhm,
I've just, for some reason, I've got a COVID hangover
mhm,
where I'm in lockdown, and it's nothing for me to smash a series on Netflix and eat a tube of Pringles.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm feeling that funkiness. I need to get that funkiness off me. It's disgusting. I don't like it.
Yeah. Well, how are you gonna get out of it? Like, what's your plan?
Well, I've put everything down in my journal and I read it, and day in, day out, when I don't do it, I kind of get more and more and more angry. And then I wouldn't say angry. Angry is probably the wrong word. Disappointed, I think is disappointed. I think disappointment is actually a stronger word, to be honest. I was disappointed in my lack of achievement with going out and doing something. For exercise, I've got everything in place. I have all the gear, no idea. I have all the I've built myself a gym in my garage. I have lights, it's waterproof. I can go out there and do it. And whilst I'm out there, I could do footage, I could do something else, or I could do, and these things that I want to do, I want to couple into something else. And I think that by me going out and doing something, and this is where I'm going to pay you another magnificent compliment. You did a post on Instagram where you were walking out in the snow, and you were almost like you were doing a daily affirmation. You had your coat on, and it was cold, and it was snowy. That's perfect. That's absolutely perfect. I thought, looked at that, I went, that will get me out there to do it. I could tie in my own personal growth, my combating the struggle against the lack of focus, complacency again, even though I shouldn't do that, but I'm going to, and I could tie that into doing a post on it. Look at me, I'm embracing the suck, I'm pushing this out there, I'm doing these things, and I'm not enjoying it, but I'm showing you that I'm preaching to I'm preaching to the choir. I want you to, as much as I want you to do these things, I want you to talk about these things on my podcast and my content. I'm doing them as well.
Exactly.
So that's where that you inspired me with that post, and I thought, yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, no, I think for me, it was also holding myself accountable. At the end of the day, if I sit there and I'm just talking about all these things and not actually doing it myself, then where's the authenticity in it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but I feel you on all of it, because I feel the same. Like this past 2 or 3 weeks, we've been going through like what they've described as a polar vortex. And we've had extreme cold weather, and I haven't been able to run, but I've also accepted it and just embraced it. But I've given myself a deadline. I've told myself, in a couple of days here, I'm going to get back to a proper routine, and it's going to be warm out. So then I have no excuse of, or sorry, it's going to be relatively warm out. So I don't have the excuse of, just not doing anything. So I think for me, the way I look at it, it's okay sometimes when things do suck to just embrace it, but then put a timeline on it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But anyways, Michael, I want to thank you again. This was really great. I really enjoyed this conversation. I felt like we have a lot in common, whether it's how we've dealt with things in the past or the things we continue to deal with, and even the work we're trying to do right now, and the message we're trying to share. I think there's a lot of commonality there, and I'm super grateful that we were able to connect and do this, and support each other on Instagram. It's I can't. One of the positives amongst the many things I can list of COVID is being able to go on Instagram and build a presence. I've been able to connect with such amazing people, and you're one of them. So I'm super grateful for that.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for reaching out. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's great to follow your content. Like I said, it is inspiring me in many ways in order to try and build and shape the message. And I would love to work with you again on future stuff, and we'll have these conversations more regularly.
For sure.
And probably have a bit more of a structure to my answers. I think give some thought beforehand instead of rambling.
No, I think part of my goal with this podcast is to just, if you were to sit in a pub and have a conversation with your friend,
Mm.
this is how it would be, right? So I just
Yeah.
want to normalize that, and let people see that, okay, anyone can have these conversations with their buddies or their friends, right? So that's the
Yeah.
goal. For people that want to get a hold of you, I know you mentioned your Instagram, but how can they find you?
At the moment, Instagram is the place which I'm operating out of exclusively.
Mhm.
But I will be launching the website very soon, and that will be the Theseus Project. I'm hoping to get a .co.uk or a .com, but it depends on cost, I think, with that one. So the website should be up soon, but you will be able to find it on the old Googles. Um, I'm probably going to stay clear of Facebook. I haven't had that much of a good experience with Facebook in the past, so I'm probably not going to go on that. But
Mhm.
Instagram is my food of choice, and stay tuned because YouTube videos and animations will be launched soon as well.
Cool. And
As
then on Instagram, you're also at the Theseus Project, right?
That's correct, yeah, at
Okay.
Theseus Project, yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thanks again, Michael.
Well, that's the end of the episode. Thank you again for tuning in and showing your support. Until next week.